The Emperor of Man has to be one of the most complicated characters within Warhammer 40k. An unabashed tyrant, genocidal madman, the greatest hypocrite who's ever lived, and of course, the worst father that's ever existed in fiction. And you'd be pretty right to think all that, looking at some of the Emperor's actions, from wiping out alien species just for being in his way, taking over human nations by just bombing the hell out of them and slaughtering the populations when they refused to submit to his imperium, treating his own sons like tools and emotionally manipulating them with fatherly affection to get them to do what he wanted, and just being a prick to those who didn't fit his high criteria, and to scream heretic and fire bolt rounds into the ceiling is to completely ignore all the times Biggie was, without a doubt, a total asshole. The one that springs most to mind with me was the burning of Monarchia, a hyper-religious city that worshipped the Emperor as a god, built by his hyper-religious son Lorgar, that he gave a legion of super soldiers to. The Emperor didn't like to be considered a deity, because he thought that worship was bad for a progressive society, so his response was to have the entire city burned to the ground and all of its citizens killed, and then mind-raped his son Lorgar and 100,000 of his sons. And I have heard that this was an attempt to teach them all what worshipping a god is like, being rendered powerless to a being that could care less about your existence. Well, I agree that's probably what Biggie was going for with Lorgar, but was there really no, less violent way to go about doing this? The man was also all about just wiping out alien species, which I also find appalling because not every Xenos out there was trying to harm mankind, yet wiping them all out was either part of his policy or he just let it happen because it just didn't fit what he wanted the galaxy to be. It's so easy to see the Emperor doing all this because he's an unabashed tyrant, but take the time to really dig into his actions and you'd find it's far more nuanced than that. He is one who I believe genuinely cares about mankind, but he certainly has a Machiavellian ends justify the means sort of thing going on. According to the lore, the Emperor has existed since like the dawn of humanity, yet at no point did he ever try and take over and rule it, just slightly influence events from the sidelines. The only time he came out was during the Age of Strife, when mankind had been completely fractured across the galaxy and looked to be driving itself into extinction. The Emperor wasn't really being a tyrant, because that's necessarily what he wanted to do, but is more of a fight fire with fire because warlords were all over Earth and especially the galaxy. The galaxy at large was just this mess of warlords, hostile aliens, and literal demons popping out of nowhere, which isn't to say he shouldn't have used diplomacy whenever possible, or that he didn't. But the Biggie had a habit to just use force basically all the time and without restraint. He also played the tyrant because being a psyker, the man was able to see the future, not with perfect clarity, but he knew something was coming, something big, and felt he had to move fast. Otherwise, he might not be ready for it, and mankind could really be wiped out this time. Everything he did with building the Imperium was not for himself, nor was it for any of his superhuman creations. I mean, he says as much in the book The First Heretic, after the burning of Monarchia, when his hyper-religious son, Lorgar, is trying to tell his father that he is without a doubt a god, that thousands of worlds and untold billions toil for his will, and is insisting that he is a god and this is his Imperium. And what the Emperor responds is, quote, "It is not my Imperium, it is the Imperium of man, the Empire of humanity." The Emperor has to be the one man that could genuinely make the case that he is a god. He's almost omniscient, can project himself across hundreds of thousands of light years to appear to people, and was, throughout the Great Crusade, guiding human vessels to their destinations. Like millions of them. But he doesn't have a god complex. He doesn't want people worshipping him. I genuinely believe that all of his conquering and hostile takeovers was done in an attempt to save mankind, which was driving itself into extinction. Its old federation had fallen into a patchwork of empires, major threats were not really being taken care of, and it was being slowly but surely chipped away by greater powers across the galaxy. Everything he has done, he did so for the good of most of mankind, a fact I believe is true, especially after he was wounded at the end of the Horus Heresy. He allowed himself to be placed on the Golden Throne to continue powering a beacon to guide human ships for like 10,000 years. a device that has been slowly but surely fragmenting in his soul and has turned him into a corpse on a throne. The man is a perpetual, meaning that if he just allows himself to die, he'll regenerate no problem. But the Emperor didn't do that. He knew full well that if he didn't get back on that throne, then demons would rip open portals across Earth, and humanity's ability to use their FTLs would be gone forever. He chose to remain on a spirit-leeching throne for 10,000 years, unable to do anything to command the Imperium, or keep it from falling into stagnation and corruption. Like, he didn't try setting any kind of reset button, he just tried to keep it afloat. Even on that throne, he has slowly empowered people with his psychic might over the centuries to try and win battles, not to really change the Imperium, but just to buy mankind just one more decade of life. Like, he has no plan. All he was doing was just giving mankind a boost to keep their heads above the water. Knowing full well that there was no long-term objective or plan, yet he did it anyway. He suffered for 10,000 years. If the Emperor really was just a selfish tyrant, why would he do that? It's because he really does care about humanity and its continued survival. His methods are brutal, like no arguments here, but he sat on the golden throne just to buy time for anything to come along and save mankind. Something else I wanted to touch on, which is another major talking point about the Emperor, is the Primarchs, his own sons. Does he really care about them? Well, in the short story First Lord of the Imperium, Malcador, his closest confidant, is talking to a dying friend, Sailba Niastja, discussing the current civil war between the Primarchs ripping apart the Imperium, and he says that the Primarchs' rebellion was supposed to happen, except for the part about the dark gods of chaos empowering them. The Emperor intentionally favored some over others to encourage a war that would decimate the superhuman Astartes that were tools to reunite the galaxy and weren't supposed to stick around. The Imperium is for humanity, not the post-humans. While there are moments where you can definitely make the case that the Emperor and even Malcador harbor a genuine care for the Primarchs, they ultimately care more about humanity's overall survival and dominance of the galaxy more than them. Now, why am I basing this idea on something Malcador says? Well, that's because Malcador was the Big E's closest confidant and friend. He shared a lot of his true internal thoughts with Malcador, and I do think that what he says in this short story is mostly true. Then there's also the newer lore bit about Rabuti Gilliman's resurrection, where he enters the throne room and his father greets him not as a son who has come home, but more like a tool he has found after being lost for a while. I mean, his son was stabbed in the throat and left in stasis for like 10,000 years and was only just able to be revived, and yet all the Emperor does here is instructs Gilly to go forth and save mankind, and that's pretty much it. The Emperor might show some love for his sons and affection that is probably genuine, as they are his sons, but ultimately it's mankind he cares for. It's mankind he started the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade for. It's mankind he made the Primarchs and the Astartes for. And it is mankind he built the Imperium of Man for. He is most certainly a genocidal jerk that played with his own children's emotion to conquer the galaxy through excessive force. So don't get me wrong, I still think he's someone I wouldn't want to meet. He is very much a guy who is in lines with the ends justify the means philosophy. But he is certainly more than just an unabashed tyrant, a man with great power and responsibilities, one that saw the mess mankind was in and knew even worse stuff was incoming and decided a tyrant is what the galaxy needed. While his methods were horrible, they were not for selfish reasons, but a genuine desire to save mankind in a way he believed was the only way. As the saying goes, the road to hell is often paved with good intentions. If you enjoyed this video and are new to the channel, hit that like button and comment down below what you thought about my assessment, whether or not you agreed or not, or would like to just add your own thoughts. Check out my other video essays, music analysis videos, overanalyzing She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, and other complex character video. You might find them enjoyable as well, and please consider subscribing for more content to come.